My name is Nick Floyd. I have a long history with Magic the Gathering. I created the Dan Dan variant. Now I'm creating this. Welcome to Magic Storytime. This is Episode 5, Salt Lake City Pro Tour Qualifier, Spring 1996. In the spring of 96, some friends and I went to the first Pro Tour Qualifier they had in Salt Lake City, the closest metropolitan area about 2.5 hours to the west. There were 5 or 6 of us who made the trip to Salt Lake. This was a few months after the first Magic the Gathering Pro Tournament in the middle of February of that year. The format for this tournament was the same format of that first Pro Tournament. It was Type 2 with a twist, basically standard, but it was called Type 2 back then, Type 1 being analogous to Vintage today. Type 2 was something that we could do, none of us having the Power 9. So Type 2, but the twist was that you had to include 5 cards from each set in Type 2 at the time in your deck and sideboard. These sets were 4th Edition, Fallen Empires, Homelands, Chronicles, and Ice Age. Though the deck lists from the first Pro Tournament were probably available if we sought them out online, the internet was still in its toddler stage and net decking was not really a thing. The deck I took was a red-green deck of my own build. I can't remember exactly what my deck list was, but it worked around Orcish Lumberjack and Org and had direct damage as creature removal and possible finishers. I think I had a couple of Autumn Willow in there too. Type 2 had a restricted list at the time, though they would get rid of that within a year. When we registered at the tournament site, which was a large conference room at the University of Utah, we were assigned DCI numbers. They got rid of those recently. DCI stood for Duelist Convocation International. It was Wizards' player record-keeping wing until 2022 for Magic and its other Deckmaster collectible card games. I never really played the others, and I may not remember them all. In the 90s, there was Vampire: The Eternal Struggle and Netrunner, both partially designed by Magic creator Richard Garfield. Netrunner still exists in the form of Android Netrunner living card game by Fantasy Flight Games, now produced by Null Signal Games. Vampire: The Eternal Struggle had some expansions in PDF by a fan-made organization called Black Chauntry Productions, but that's a tangent for, well, no other time. Anyway, the DCI number I was assigned had only 6 digits, since this event was pretty early in the DCI history. If you question my long-term memory on these stories, especially after my first anecdote, know that I can still remember my DCI number, and still remembered it after I hardly used it to enter Magic tournaments for over a decade. I still remember it today. I guess it does have only 6 digits, so that helps. I lost one of my first 3 matches, and when we looked at the pairing sheet for the 4th round, I saw that my next opponent was Mark Justice. Yeah, Mark Justice, 1995 US champion, 3rd at Worlds that year, 8th place at the first Pro Tour. That Mark Justice. We knew Mark Justice lived in Salt Lake City and owned a card shop there, but I didn't expect that I would have to play against him. I can't say that I wasn't a little intimidated. I'm sure Justice didn't need to win at this qualifier to play in the next Pro Tour, but he was probably just there for the practice and the fun. Mark was not playing the same deck he played at the first Pro Tour, even though he could have. His deck at that event was a white and red artifact control deck, but at this Pro Tour qualifier, he was playing an Urnham-Geddon deck, similar to finalist Bertrand Lestree's deck from that tournament. I remember one game, Mark had just dropped an Urnham Djinn and Armageddon, and I got cocky and attacked with a creature that had been granted Forest Walk, which Mark promptly blocked and pointed out that he no longer had any forests. Dumb. Lesson learned. He swept me, but at this time, at Magic tournaments like Pro Tour qualifiers, and this being among the first, players were instructed to play 3 games against each opponent, even if one player had won the first 2. It helped with tiebreakers or something. Anyway, I won the 3rd game. I think legitimately, I was just a teenage kid, but I don't think Mark Justice was the type of player who would throw a game just to make me feel better. After our match, Mark talked to me. He looked through my deck and gave me some tips, pointing out I shouldn't play a full set of the situationally good org, and I said that I wouldn't, except that org was 4 of the 5 required Fallen Empires cards. That set was so bad, it was hard to find usable cards. Anyway, I would run into Mark Justice a few times in the next few years, and he was always very nice to me. But those are Magic stories for another time. None of us Rock Spring players did particularly well at that tournament, but we won more than we lost, and had a great time. We stayed that night at a hotel and went home the next day. We all knew we would be back to Salt Lake City for more tournaments in the future. But those are Magic stories for another time. My next video will be my second Danecdote, where as a bonus I will release a Endless Dan variant. No creatures. I know that sounds weird, but you will have to come back to see what I mean. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share this video. Thanks for watching Magic Storytime.